Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Ignite Your Heart and Soul, right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My guest today is Suzanne Anderson. We're going to be talking about a little bit of a memoir of how, you make your path by walking it, a transformational field guide of getting through trauma and loss. What comes out of the loss? She recently released her new book, You Make Your Path by Walking It, which is June 13th, which is brand new. And when her beloved husband took his own life, and with it, her life as she knew it, Susan Anderson had to face a choice. Would she be broken down and defeated, or broken open and transformed? So this part memoir and part guidebook, Make Your Path by Walking It, accompanies readers on their own journey through the barren landscape of trauma and grief, offering comfort, guidance, inspiration to make meaning out of loss. Whether you're going through a personal dark night or struggle with those uncertain, disruptive global times, this book offers a proven pathway to allow the breakdown to be the breaking open into a whole new way of living, loving, and leading. And drawing from the years of exploration to the development of the human potential and the personal shattering journey of loss, Suzanne guides us through to make her own path through the darkest times, to become the light in the world that others can look to in their own times of need. We know that this is absolutely apropos to our channel, and this is what it's all about. So perfect. She's also the founder of the Mysterious Woman, a psychologist, author, coach, leadership consultant, transformational leader. Her pioneering work, including is in guiding others to awaken to their full feminine and masculine strength, combining insights and practices from ancient wisdom, deep psychology, modern neuroscience. She has dedicated the past 30 years to decoding and embodying integral and big word, sorry, can't get my tongue around it, pathway to unlock the next level of our innate potential. So we have got somebody here that I know my audience is going to love, because this is what it's all about. We're all going to face those bumps in the road. Sometimes we're going to have Grand Canyons. Nobody goes through life without a loss. That's just part of life. But it's what do we do with it? And how do we embrace it in a way that it actually becomes something that's a guidance to really who we are and what we're meant to do? We're chapters in a book of our own life, aren't we? And every chapter is going to bring something different to us. But how do we cope for it? How do we get through it and not get stuck in it? And I think this is what your book seems to represent, is not getting stuck in the loss, but taking the beauty of the memories and having them in your backpack in your next journey of life. Welcome to the show, Han.
Thank you, Sarah. Great to be here.
So yes, you lost your husband, and when they take their own lives, especially, there's the huge amount of guilt that goes with it. Why didn't I see the signs? Could I have stopped it? There's all of that, the what ifs, and the what ifs, and the what ifs can take you into a spiral down. And did you go down that path, or did you manage to catch yourself before you kind of spiraled down into that?
Right. Well, that is a critical conversation, I think, for anyone who is a suicide survivor, which adds a layer on to loss in general, just what it is to be with a very traumatic loss. And I would say in my case, I was aware of the potential, this what I came to call the suicide swamp, which has shame is a very big part of that.
Yeah.
And usually shame is involved in the pattern that actually takes people out of this world. And it can be it's very toxic, and it can get spread around to everybody who's left. Now, of course, you have to it wouldn't be natural that you don't reflect on what didn't I see, how did I not see it, and what might I have been able to do. And that's just part of, I'd say it was part of my own reflection. At the same time, I was very clear that it was not my suicide. And that's a really important distinction, that my husband chose to do that, to take his life, to leave when he did. And I was then put on a very different path than the path I might have been on, the way I imagined our life together, which was actually an incredible life. And so at that point, that's the juncture where, that really takes something to come into the present moment of, this is now the path I am on, but I am not the one who suicided.
Yes. And we don't know what draws people to it. I think that if you could get to the other side and interview the people that did commit suicide, for many of them, I just wanted the pain to stop. I didn't really intend to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. And then for others, it's just like, I just couldn't carry on in the heart and soul that I was in. It was too much of an anguish. And, when somebody does take their life, you kind of think, did you not love me enough to fight for me to stay? And my dad died at 11, not out of suicide, but if he had changed his lifestyle, he would have continued to live. Instead, like a fighter pilot he went chasing death. Come on, death, come and get me, come and get me. And it was like, well, aren't we enough for you to fight for? But we have to understand they're in their own journey, their own anguish, their own pain, their own mind, and that sometimes we just can't penetrate in there. It's got nothing to do with whether they love you or not. It's what's going on inside of them that they can't cope with.
Right. Well, I'd say both. You have, that's the challenge of holding both. It's true, 100% true, that people, those that suicide, they are obviously suffering, and absolutely everything becomes very small.
Yeah.
And I only see myself, and I see my own suffering. And from talking to people who planned a suicide, but it didn't actually succeed, what that is, what that was like, and the way that everything just sort of collapses around to be this one thing that I can do, and I'll be out of this pain, and I have to do it. And there isn't really a lot of thought about who and the devastation you're leaving behind.
Yeah.
I'd also say on the other side, then, for those that are left behind, there is, and in my case, there's the whole range of feelings. Of course, the shock initially, but then grief and anger and fear. And it is very important, and this is something I really address in my new book, that we are able to be with those feelings and give ourselves the space, create the practices, be in the practices to metabolize those feelings.
Yes.
Because it isn't, and in my case, I'd say I had a lot of understanding. I work in the world,
right,
for 10 years in the world, with women, and what I call this new potential, that's it's sort of an innate potential that's trying to get awakened now in this evolutionary moment. And it has to do, as you said in the introduction, with more of our feminine and masculine nature actually coming together, which means we have to do a little excavation of some of the early traumas in our lives that were the condition that had us split off parts of ourselves into the shadow or into the dark, right? That's a kind of trauma, what I call developmental trauma. So I knew something about trauma. That is the work I was doing. And this, I was very aware that of the need to metabolize the emotional piece of this trauma. And very often people that, let's say, even have a deep spiritual path, which I do and have had for many years, can do a spiritual bypass, can make it okay and all right, and he's in a better place, and he didn't know what he was doing, and that's great. And that's a part that was also true for me. I could hold that he was somewhere out of his suffering.
Yes.
And in the book, I write about the ways in which I participated, I think, in helping him transition to the other side, and energetic rituals that I did. At the same time, I was, I had my own feelings to process, and it was very real that I was also very angry
Yeah.
that he left me. I just written the manuscript of my first book, The Way of the Mysterious Woman, Upgrading How You Live, Love, and Lead. That was complete. I was about to launch a new program. We were about to host a wedding for his niece and the son of his best friend from Indonesia. I mean, there was a lot that got shattered in his leaving. So just to say that both, capacity to be really truly with the feelings, I think is very important to learn how to do that.
Yes. And every single one of those feelings is completely valid. You have every justification to feel them, to acknowledge them. You can't bypass them. You can't go just, they're in a better world now and not acknowledge all the pain, the anger, the hurt, the confusion. You have to look at every single one of those emotions and kind of treat it as its own identity and listen to it, hear it, nurture it so that it can be released. It's not something you can bypass or ignore. You have to be present with it, don't you?
Well, I mean, if you do bypass, it doesn't go away. So this
No.
is beauty. If you think about the iceberg metaphor for our consciousness, we have what's above the waterline, which is who I think I am, and we have what's below the waterline, which is 2/3 of the iceberg, by the way. It's unconscious. And the
Yeah.
direction of the iceberg is determined by that, what is underneath the waterline. So
Yes.
that is to say, our feelings, our impulses, what's actually going on doesn't go away because we don't acknowledge it.
No.
And it starts to have this incredible force, of course, moving us in directions that are not our best options. So that is why the title of the book, the new book, You Make Your Path by Walking, is really saying this, the very first and essential step here when you go through a dramatic loss, and that doesn't have to be a husband by suicide. That can be the loss of a relationship that ends, a divorce. That could be the loss of health. I mean, a certain
Yes.
kind of health you have, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a disease. It could be the loss of a child going off
Mm.
to school and leaving the home. It could be the loss of, so many
It's a
losses. I'm
way
saying
of life, right? It's a
a
loss
way
of
of
a
life.
way of life. Yeah.
There's a loss of a way of life. Our identity has gotten wired,
Mm.
and it's at those moments that it's really key that you can come into the present moment. Now, denial is the first thing that happens when you go through a big loss,
Hmm.
and that's an actual, the neuroscience of that we understand really well. It's helpful because
Yeah.
otherwise our system gets too flooded, too
Yes.
overwhelmed. But staying in denial for a long time is not helpful.
No.
So that's
It
the difference,
ferments.
where you can actually, with guidance and help,
Mm.
accept that life that was is no longer.
Hmm.
And that future that you saw, and I certainly saw a beautiful future out ahead for David and me. We had an amazing estate with our sort of magical um, sanctuary that he had brought buildings over from Indonesia and temples, and we had an incredible retreat center, really. And I saw many things in my future, but that was not going to be. That was gone. And
Mm.
so the being able to settle yourself into right now, which you do by coming in to the embodied feelings. You come into to what's actually going on now, which is what we just were talking about, the feelings. Then from that ground, you have a better chance of making your path by walking. In other words, of seeing the one next stone
Yes.
that'll rise up, right?
And one of the worst things that happens to anybody that is in shock or has had a trauma of any kind, or is having to redirect, is the feeling sense of paralyzed, and there's the fear of where am I going, what am I taking with me, what's waiting for me, how am I going to do this, what am I doing, because the life as you've known it is gone, and you kind of feel you've lost yourself on where am I going now? What am I doing now? And it can be very paralyzing for people. And some people just kind of end up getting stuck there, never moving forward. And I would
Right.
say the biggest leap that you can take is the first step. Just literally put that first foot in front of the other blind,
Well,
deaf, and dumb.
movement is everything. That's
Yes,
why you make your path by walking. Movement is that there is a way you're in movement. That
flow,
doesn't mean
in
you're
flow.
going, driving yourself into the future with a sort of aggressive energy. It means that you are willing to be in the movement and not getting stuck,
Yeah.
and not actually um, being so. And this is the work I do. This is where the word mysterial, which
Yeah.
is a word that I mentioned in terms of the name of my first book, is actually means part of that, and I invented the word, but part of that is the willingness to be with the mystery. This
Yes.
is so needed right now. This is the point. I
Absolutely.
think the culture
Absolutely.
that we're in right now,
Yes.
be with ambiguity and uncertainty and mystery. I mean, we need this, right?
Yes.
This capacity to see it not as the devastating void, but
Mm.
as we begin to partner with it. Now, that is
Yeah.
very hard, obviously, in the midst of something traumatic like
Mm.
this, looking for anything to hold on to that you could possibly hold on to. But that's the invitation in a way. It's right to trust that there's something coming your mind right now cannot even envision.
Right.
Something holding you, I call a friendly universe, or we could even say the great, beautiful field of love.
Hmm.
There's something that you are part of that's so much larger than my own little self that you can rest into and that you are unfolding with. And that's the real possibility I feel in a situation like this, that your becoming is actually accelerating. Who you are
Yes.
and who you are becoming has the possibility of, I mean, really shifting, profoundly shifting.
And needing to on many levels. When we're children, we don't question that, we're going to learn to crawl. It's not, we don't know those stages. As a baby, we discover we can roll over. Oh, now we can get on our knees. Oh, now we can stand. Oh, now a foot in front of each other. Everything is discovery and everything is wondrous, right? And we don't realize everything that we have today that we think we may have lost, we discovered along the way, we embraced along the way, we created along the way. And all we're asking is that, as I said, blind, deaf, and dumb in order to see, hear, and feel. You don't know what that next step is. But when you're aligned with the universe, heart, soul, spirit, in trust, and say, I am open and ready to receive, then that next step is going to lead you the right way. And everything that you have done and everything you have been is in your backpack. And it's there to support you at whatever stage you're going to be at next. But be willing to be wondrous, be willing to be exploratory, be willing to not just settle. You're mourning what you've lost, yes, but again, look at it as it's an end of chapter. That doesn't mean it's an end of my life. It just means there's a
Right.
new chapter, a new opportunity, a
Well, it
new
means it's
exploration.
the end of my life as I knew it is what it
Yes,
means.
yes.
End of my life as I
I've
knew
had
it. And so
so
that,
many end of chapters, and I had no idea what next chapter I was going into. And I think what we mourn a lot of is, even when we'll look back on the chapter and sometimes think, that was rather dysfunctional. It wasn't getting me anywhere, but I felt secure in it. And what I'm looking at in the future is I don't know where my security is. I don't know what to hold on to. Right. And I think that's what's kind of stopped some people from moving forward, is like, I want to feel rooted. I want to know that someone's got me. I want to feel safe.
right. Well, so then the invitation there, I would say, is that you recognize you can have yourself. And
Mhm.
that's where it all begins, is that there's this sense of, I am here for me. In my
Yes.
system, I call that the healthy mother archetype in the work that I do. Like, we really have our inner mother intact. And this is really critical. And I'd say, for anybody who's listening to this now, who's going through a difficult loss, that self-compassion is really critical,
Huge. Mm.
because there's so much, in my case, I would say there was so much being shattered all around me. I lost literally everything within 6 months. I lost my home. I lost of course, my beloved husband. and my community. I left the island I lived on. I lost my cat. I mean, really everything in my outer world was gone.
Your dream for the future, everything, right?
Everything. And you're that sort of being reduced
Mm,
to with really there's nothing to hold on to out there. And
hmm
I got to see the ways that I was identified or attached. There's a beautiful thing you may have seen at some points, or you've maybe heard about, which is a Tibetan practice with a sand mandala. Do you know the mandalas in Tibetan Buddhism?
Yes.
And there's a ritual where they have these tiny little funnels that they tap with colored sand, and they create this mandala, and then they painstakingly, while chanting over days, it's a whole ritual process, create this absolutely exquisite mandala
Mm-hmm.
of all of these fine grains of sand. And then at the very end, the final piece of the ritual is they take a broom and just sweep it off.
Yes.
And the metaphor there, of course, is a central premise of Buddhism, which is impermanence, that
Yeah.
really everything is impermanent. Now, I knew that, we could say, I knew that from
Yeah.
a perspective, but I certainly hadn't lived it like, well, I believe that, but don't take everything that
Yeah.
I have in my life
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Please, not everything. And when that happened, that was a very, rude awakening for me into what is impermanence really. And so this is the invitation. This is one of the very, central pieces is, can you, not hold on to what was, because the truth, and this is really key, because for me, for example, I was aware I was never going to get back to that life.
Never.
Like that life wasn't going to be reborn. But
hmm
very often the strategy is, let me just survive this
hmm
to get back to where I was.
Yes. The
Rather
security.
than rather than this, there is no going back. There is
No.
only going to be what's ahead. But in the meantime, how does that unfold? That unfolds because I'm here now. In other
Mm,
words, I don't get this moment back. I don't get this day back.
mm-mm.
I don't get whatever is happening, however painful it is, however
Joyous it is.
difficult it is, or joyous
Mm-hmm.
in a regular moment. But in the case of a trauma, there's a lot of that sense of, I don't want to be in this moment. But
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, it is the moment I have. And the ability to be in that moment is what determines what unfolds.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that where we're talking about kind of attitude. And I think, if we can change that attitude to gratitude for what we have had, the experience, because after all, wherever we've been and whatever we've had, it all sums up to the word experience. I've experienced this, I've experienced that. Those experiences can go with us, even if the tangible can't, right? You've lost the home, the way of life, but the experience of what you had can be taken with you and transformed into a new experience. And I think if we can remember that, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it created an experience which now gives you a different insight, a different approach, a different attitude, a different form of gratitude to what comes next or what is now. And of course, where we are now, we're planting the seeds now for the next moment. How we nurture, how we water it is what's going to grow in the next moment. And so
Mm-hmm.
many people are looking to be, yes, but what about next week or the next month or the next year or the next that? Well, what about now? Because the gift of the present is in the now. And you take all the experience that you have had and observe it in the now, then you actually realize the gifts you have had, even in the sorrow, and the appreciation that you had that made for things that you took for granted for before.
Totally. Yeah.
I don't think we, as a human race, know how to be present. We're not taught that. Everything is get on with it. This tomorrow, 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 and it's like, well, what about the gift of today? What about the present of now? What about that silence, that being still, that being in the moment with nothing else around you? Right? It's a beautiful sense of clarity that you have in those moments. But as a human race, we're not taught that. The spiritual is always teaching us that's where the clarity is, that's where the peace is. It's not in the rushing forward. It's in the moments of silence and being still where we can understand things, understand how we feel, or understand where where the resilience is, where the strength, where the courage is, and what can come next. But I think a lot of the time we're so busy either trying to get through something quickly or ignoring it, but just not knowing how to be present because perhaps we're afraid it's going to be too painful to be present.
Right, I would absolutely agree. I would say agree with you. Yeah.
But that's what the spirituality teaches us, isn't it? To be present. When the monks were creating the mandalas, they were present with it. It wasn't something that was meant to be longevity. It was about the gift of the download, of the channeling, of the presence. And although they sweep it away, it hasn't gone with the experience that it gave them. That
Right.
experience that it gave them, the knowledge that it gave them while they were doing that is something they take forward with them.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're circling around here is the way I would think about it is, and the way I see it, and I really go into this a lot in my first book, I think we're in a very profound evolutionary moment.
We are.
And there's lots of indications, certainly not alone in thinking that. Obviously, you do too.
Yes,
There are
yes,
lots of
100%.
signs and
We're in
signals.
conscious rising. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a and from in my view, it has to do with the rise of the conscious feminine. So the conscious feminine that comes into relationship with the conscious masculine and something new I call, mysterious is just a word I've
I love the
just
word. It's beautiful.
this new way of being. But it's speaking to a way that we are being asked by the complexity of these times to grow a consciousness that's actually a match for these times. As Einstein said, you can't solve the problems of today with the consciousness that created them yesterday.
Right.
So one of the ways that I see this happening, and certainly with a lot of the women that I work with in the programs that I do, is often through a very dramatic wake-up call of some kind, like something of the old ways of being.
Yeah.
It's being shaken up in all of us.
Yes.
Now, for me, that was like massive and on every level. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. Sometimes it's an internal rumbling where you just know this job I've been in, this way of being in my relationship, this way I'm treating my body. It's like something's just over. And a really important piece here I feel for people is to recognize that as a wake-up call. Recognize that as an invitation to grow rather than the discomfort of something that I should move away from. I have people in my program, my sort of slogan is welcome discomfort. It's like comfort actually tells you you're going in the right direction when it comes to growth and development because, the psyche wants to keep things in homeostasis. So it will try to settle everything down and make it comfortable. When we're, as an adult, trying to grow ourselves to the next level, which is, as I say, what I think is happening, we're going to bump up against what's fired and wired together in us already that says, don't change this way of being. Don't limit that, or don't shake that limiting belief. And there are so many limiting beliefs. And that was part of the first book that I did the research around. What are the limiting beliefs that are deep down, and we are literally coded with those in the DNA.
Oof, yes.
That have been passed down for 5,000 years. Now, my research for 10 years in my university programs was with women, but we decoded, working with hundreds of women, these 5 primary limiting beliefs that are just running the show all the time.
Unconsciously.
Well, they're unconscious. They are 100% unconscious. So the work here, when a shakeup happens in your life, is the possibility to allow it to wake you up. I mean, to break you open, as I say, in a way that lets you see those limiting patterns, the limiting energy, basically, that's driving you. That's the 2/3 of the iceberg under the water.
Yes.
In a life that perhaps you would create something far different if you had access to parts of yourself that aren't wired to those limiting beliefs.
Yes. 5.5 years ago, the universe gave me a saying. The universe is going to shake us up to wake us up, for us to step up and change it up and grow up vibrationally, but also grow up as a human race. Quit the
So
whining,
my way
grow
of
up.
saying it is, my way of saying is, and I write a lot about this, is waking up. I invite so we're very similar here. Wake up, grow up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the growing. I'm a developmental psychologist, so
Yes.
it's
Mm-hmm.
growing ourselves up. And then the third piece is show up, because
Yes.
I think we're needed right now, and that's the work that I do, is really saying, for the women that I work with, it's really see yourself as a woman on the frothy edge of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
You are actually transforming yourself for the sake of future generations. Somebody has to be out here on the edge. We're bringing in,
Yes.
I feel, and others would say, a completely new species that has access to so many other ways of knowing and being in the world. And how are those going to come online? They're going to come online because some of the old patterns are disrupted.
Yes, eliminated. Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. And that, we have been shaken up in the last few years. COVID shook us up in a lot of ways, a good way. And, the people that are kind of complaining the most and shouting the most and resisting the most and trying to hold on to the past, the people that's still very much in that third dimension of not wanting to shake those beliefs up. I'm not going where you're going. I don't know if you've ever read Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
The two mice and two men around the cheese, and
Yeah.
you've got Sniffy and Scurry when the cheese goes missing, goes for Hem and Ha. I mean, Ha has for a while has to realize, gosh, I'm hungry. I better go and look for the cheese. And Hem, give me back my cheese. Who do I have to kill? Who do I have to sue? And we have that going on right now, where people are refusing to change, refusing to look at those old beliefs as being anything other than out of date programs. And then you've got other people that are listening to the calling of the consciousness. But in that growing of the consciousness, they realize that, oh my goodness, for so long I've been living life with a veil in front of me, unaware of what I was doing or who I was hurting, and realize I was the one hurting myself. And they've got to go through that forgiveness of, I was not to blame because I was just living by old patterning. Now I know differently. I can choose differently. I can walk a different path. I can raise that consciousness. I can be that better person because I am now conscious of who I am as a person and what my job is here on this planet, how to
Right.
contribute. But that's the journey, isn't it? That's the
Right.
exploration.
That's the journey. And the first step, I would say, is that self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to see the patterns, and that's what can happen during a traumatic so let's say a shake-up.
Shake up. Yes.
You actually get, we say in psychology, we get object, what is subject. So what is subject? I can't see it, it's just who I am, it's how I am in the world. And then all of a sudden, like I can see my hand now. Oh, like that. Like I look at the world like this and I don't even know I see the world like this.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden I can see, oh, there's a hand there,
Yeah.
and I start to actually identify those
Mm.
ways of being that are no longer helping me. So that's a really important first step, self.
Yes.
So that's why we call it a wake up call, because it's you're coming awake
Yeah.
to more. You can see more, but that's not enough. That's the beginning step, and it's an essential first step. Then we actually have to do the work of identifying what has kept that
Yeah.
way of being here, like what's underneath the surface of the water.
Mm-hmm.
What is that habitual way of being that got wired and fired together when I was younger, for example? Like what is that? What is that might need to change?
Past
And
generations, ancestral,
and
past
there's
lives,
also
everything, the whole
ancestral
strain.
trauma.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's
Mm-hmm.
ancestral trauma. And then that piece, then the work is, these are parts of ourselves. So let's say, for example, um, there was a part when you were growing up, it wasn't the thing to, if you expressed yourself strongly or you expressed anger, you got a lot of pushback from those that you were trying to get love, safety, and belonging from. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens to that anger is, well, I want to get love, safety, and belonging. So I'm smart in what we call the adaptive child. I learned, okay, I'm going to tuck that away. I'm not an angry person. I'll put that in. I won't be angry. I won't express anger. Of course, anger is a natural emotion. As I
Yes.
said already, that charge is there in the unconscious anyway, but it goes underground. And then it erupts out every now and again in ways that aren't helpful. But it also means I don't have a clear voice. I don't set my boundaries. I don't honor what I know is true for me, which is what anger gives me some information about what I want, what's important to me. And we go on, we make it everyone else out there angry. So the work is, how do you metabolize that charge in the body that you couldn't do as a younger child,
Yeah.
so that you can show up with your voice and what you need. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a process, but this is how we grow ourselves into the next level.
How we
Now, and
grow up, right?
grow up. It is the growing up, but
Yes,
it requires facing the darkness. And a lot of the second book is the work of how do we come to really learn to see in the dark. And if you think of
yes,
yang, we have light and dark interpenetrating in that
yes.
beautiful cycle, but we prejudice the yang. That we've been 5,000 years inside a patriarchal worldview. We know that. And we go
Mm-hmm.
into that research in my first book. I mean, that's just, we understand that. That wasn't necessarily wrong, by the way. That was evolution's move forward at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But we need now, I call this the conscious feminine, we need to bring our awareness of the dark and the value of the dark
Yeah.
together. Right.
It's funny that you say that, because for a while there, I was having a tumultuous marriage. So for a long time, my spirit was wounded and I went into the dark. And there was a light there kind of calling me. And it was like, no, I just can't come out into that light. It's too ugly. It's too painful. And I was in that dark. And I realized the longer you're there, the more apathy you could get when you are darkness yourself. When I did come out, at first it was very bright. I felt shadows chasing me. And then I adjusted to the light. Now I can go into the darkness. It is my
Right.
peace and my sanctuary, for I am the light in the darkness. And when you look at it, our entire organs are working in darkness. Does that make them evil? Does that make them wrong? No. We are the light on the outside with the darkness on the inside, literally. And that is just the balance of life. It is the yin and the yang. And we love to clarify things as good and bad. Whereas if we could look at how they work together, we would see the strength that they can combine together when we don't label them as one thing or the other, but look at them as, when they are most together, the strength that they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the invitation, I think, of these times, because we are already gone through COVID. That was a very dark time. And, in my view, it was sort of like someone took a hockey stick. I'm Canadian, so I can say someone took a hockey stick and put it in the machinery of life and
Yes.
stopped it all. Now, the
Yes.
opportunity then was to say, what's actually going on, and we saw that happening. There were various waves
Reflect.
where things that were not all right were starting to show themselves in culture,
Yes.
and hopefully potentially in ourselves, where I don't like how I'm working, and I'm the commute
Yeah.
that I've had, and I don't like how I don't see my kids until this time, or the way I'm treating, or this relationship that I'm stuck with now, and actually it wasn't really working for me, or how do I want to change that? We got to see a lot of things. But these are, that was the beginning, I feel,
Yeah.
of a wake up we're
Yes.
getting
That was part of
collectively.
the wake up. Yeah. The shake up and the wake up. Yes. It gave us the gift of pause so we could reflect and
Yes,
really review our lives.
but we're
And
going to
then,
be in difficult times coming up here too. We know
yes.
that, we see it. Just look at the climate situation we're in right
Yeah.
now. And this is a crisis, even if we were all to get on board and recognize that we actually have a climate crisis. We still aren't going to be able to stop some of the things that are happening right now.
No,
We have a lot
we're
of.
beyond that point of return there. Now it's
So
about,
what are the challenges that are coming to us, are going to require us to learn how to see in the dark, to really
yes.
be capable of being in the dark and in the light, and carry both with us. Like
Yes.
they
Yes.
are,
They integrate. Yeah.
so interwoven.
The yin and the yang. Yeah. They need each other. They're the balance. Right. And I think where we're at the present time is that um, when you're pregnant, you've got 9 months of a whole lot going on. Not only are you creating a life, but there's the morning sickness, there's the fatigue, there's the aches and pains, there's the, like, where am I going to put my back? And then of course you've got the pain of actually giving birth. And the moment that baby is put in your arms, you've forgotten everything. You've forgotten all of the pain that it took to get there because of this life in your arms. And I think in many, many ways, we are going through our own pregnancy of a rebirth. But the moment that we do step into that rebirth and see ourselves from the inside out, from the soul, the heart, the spirit of who we are, the essence of who we now are the child in our lives that we can choose to live from the adult's intellect and the soul's intellect in this beautiful rebirth of ourselves and choose a different path, which we didn't have the choice of as a child, but we can have a choice of as a second life. So whatever discomfort, as you were mentioning right in the beginning, whatever discomfort we're going through, in many ways is saying it's working. You know, when we house clean and we do a thorough spring clean, is it comfortable? Is it something we relish in? No. But don't we feel great afterwards when we've got rid of what we need to get rid of and everything's cleaned up and everything looks good around us afterwards? Ah, yeah, that feels good, right? But we don't necessarily like going through it. I think Trevor Noah said, we don't have to like the experience of going through it, but the transformation of who we are at the end of it, we can enjoy.
Right. What I would say is very similar to what he said, but it would be accepting what is, like this is what is now, prepares the ground for what might become.
Exactly.
Like accepting what is, being able to be with what is.
Yes.
This essential.
And it is. You know, it's you know that what is it? It just is. It just is. You know, sometimes we don't have the words, we don't need to explain what is. It just simply is. That's the real gift of presence when it just is. And you can't really describe that to other people, but they can all feel it if they're willing to go through that process and they'll understand what it just is means.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that my book will be helpful in that regard, and that is why ultimately I ended up, after David took his life, when my first book was getting ready to come out. It took me a couple of years to get back to actually getting that published, and then several years later, I needed to write for myself.
Yeah.
I needed to write myself together. I did not plan to write a book for other people. I planned to make my path by walking, to see how everything, this, what I call this upgraded inner operating system that my work works with, and whether that held up in the most difficult circumstances imaginable. And I was just discovering that, like living it, literally living it. But then I took myself away to on writing retreats, just at a friend's cottage, and to take that me of then back to the me who went through that initial horrific trauma of that first, especially that first year, the loss of everything, and be with her and walk myself through it. And then after I'd written everything, I ended up showing it to the editor of my first book, who said, yeah, you've got to do something with this. I think this will be really helpful. And so then I set about, that was about a year and a half ago, deciding, okay, so I ended up going with the same publisher and deciding to actually commit to bringing this out. But what I'm hoping, and one of the reasons I'm actually already getting this feedback quite extensively already, it's only been out a month, is that it's because it's my personal story, which is not captured in the first book. I have a lot of case studies in the first book.
Right.
Women who are waking up through this process I take them through these various archetypes, feminine and masculine archetypes. But in this book, it's my own story, and it's very personal and very vulnerable. And it's how I actually went through this journey. And I point toward the capacities that can, and did in my case, come online as I did that. I share the rituals that I used and why ritual matters so much for people going through a lot of loss, to work with the conscious and the unconscious. And it's my hope that it becomes kind of like a,
guidance system.
Personal, yeah, a GPS for others, that they can see, it's not just like an idea. Here are my ideas about it, but here's my lived experience. I have done this. I have moved through. My center held, we could say, in the midst of this horrific storm. And yours can too.
Yes. Yes. I've just finishing off my so-called memoir. It's kind of my perspective. It's my view of life, of my life. And and I know that somebody said, "Oh, are we going to get to hear all the juicies of all the things that happened to you?" And I said, "No, I will be addressing what's happened to me, but I'm not going to be going down the pain thing anymore because I've already gone through that. I've already healed from that. So, A, B, C, and D happened, but then this is who I became because of it. So my focus is very much on who Sarah is today." Through the various evolutions of my journey, and what each journey has done, but also what's the thread through there. What has been the thread through that, and the resilience has been one. The constantly looking forward has been one, but one that travels with me as an undercurrent all the time is sadness. And it's not necessarily for the loss, but it's very much empathic for the world when there's so much beautiful and joy and exaltation for us to live in, that we choose to live in pain and anger and anguish and be so cruel to each other. And that's something that I've always found very hard to deal with. But when writing it, it is quite because I just sat down in 3 weeks, just shut everybody off and just wrote it. And then from there, it's been, numerous levels of editing. But it's quite revealing to ourselves, isn't it? As you read it and you go through it, and it's because you're not really conscious when you're reading it, writing it. Past memories and cosmic things are writing there. And I think that's the thing of if it could be revealing to us, it has to surely be revealing to someone else out there that is in a similar situation or has any sort of relatability. But quite honestly, anybody going through any form of journey of life, they don't have to have lost somebody through suicide, as we said in the beginning. Loss is loss. How did that loss affect you? Because we all have a loss that's significant in our lives that really had a profound impact on where we went next. And sometimes it could be something that we drag the loss with us, or the regret, or the expectation that everything should turn out to be the same. And it's only in hindsight that we can look back and look at it and go, oh, that's the reason why I wasn't moving forward. Or, that's reading somebody else's story kind of has you go, ooh, ooh, when we have that reflection. And then it's a mirror back on us. I'm doing that, all right. Oh, I could do this instead.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it makes me think of one of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's a psychiatrist and author who wrote about death and dying. You probably know her work, and she was the one that identified the stages of grief that we go through or loss. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That's what she did initially, and then later in her life, and the work with David Kessler, they came up with this sixth stage, which is finding meaning. And that is a really important stage. And I think that's where the writing can be so helpful, where we're actually writing ourselves back together. That is, there's the act of finding
the needle and thread, right? The needle and thread.
Not too soon. This was really critical for me because the meaning making, we can try too soon to make it, oh, this is all going to be good. This is all for the better. No, you don't know if it's all for the better. You actually don't know how this is unfolding. Right now, you just need to be with the feelings, be open, be available for what's actually unfolding, and let the meaning making meet you further down the path. I think of, see if I can find it here, this beautiful quote by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, where she says, the most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people, and this is the line I love, beautiful people do not just happen. No. Beautiful people do not just happen. And that's the invitation, just to return full circle here to anyone who's listening, who is in the middle of a shakeup, that imagine that this is actually a call coming from your deep soul nature, from your essence, let's say, and you're embedded in the great friendly universe. So we could say from the whole great mystery herself to say, it's a kind of a sacred, holy, but very hard, yes, but also holiness, this potential. And the beauty, your own beauty, is available now in a way. Like, this is what can be happening, that your own wholeness starts to show itself in a way. You find pieces of yourself that were in the dark because you are in the dark.
Yes. Yes. You were present there.
You're more present, and you
Yes.
find the world too. You break open to the world. I found for myself, I was never more touched by the sorrow and the suffering in the world than during that time. And that stayed with me, that deep. I would have said I was a very compassionate person before, but I would also say that something broke open in that time to really, I would see somebody. Oh, I remember this one that I actually write about in the book, but this one gentleman who was all dressed in a suit, an elderly man, at a bus stop with flowers, obviously going somewhere important. And the suit didn't really fit. Everything just was, but I just felt so much compassion, imagining, where is he going? What is he going to? A funeral? Is it to a wedding? Who is this other human being who, I don't know. There's
Be the recipient of the flowers. Yeah.
Poignant moments, that you're breaking open to yourself when you can come home to yourself, come home to your own suffering, be there for yourself, really be there for yourself. Then you can be there for the world.
Well, you talked about, mothering yourself, but we've also got to remember our inner child too. Our inner child, sometimes we need to mother. But then we are both the child and the mother within the same psyche. And there are, different times that we need different ones in it. Sometimes we need that inner child's, exaltation of life, the exuberance of life, the wonderment of life that's going to make us in our self-discovery. And then sometimes we've just got the mother side of us that just wraps its arms around, say, I've got you, I'm there for you. And that it's okay. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give to ourselves and give to others and trust is our vulnerability. And by being vulnerable, we're not laying ourselves open for attack, as most people think vulnerability is. It's the honesty of who we are as a human being and accepting ourselves so utterly and completely in all our flawsomeness, our flaws, awesomeness, and loving ourselves despite whatever we think may be wrong with us. That's generally an outside opinion, not an inside one. It's just one of your beautiful flaws that's created you to be the awesome person you are.
Yeah, totally.
And we think that we have to forgive, we think that we have to permission, and yes, that's part of the process. Those words do come up. But I think one of the things that we don't talk about, and we should talk about, is that we're meant to live. We're meant to live. And if people along the way or things along the way die along the wayside, one of the important things is life itself, is engaging in life, being a participant in life, be willing to experience life fully in all its ups and downs, being present with life, and then just allowing life to come through you, from you, around you, with you. And then we kind of, what is the meaning of life? It is about living. It is about your presence being a gift to others, the contribution that you're giving to the collective. And we can only do that if we become present with ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And that's certainly, that's 100% what's in this book. So thank you for having me for this conversation. And I certainly hope that people will be interested, or at least I'm hopeful that it will be a resource for those of you going through the shake-up and the wake-up calls of life. And that would certainly be my deep desire.
We all are going through the shake-up and the wake-up of life. You can't avoid it. You can't ignore it. You can't deny it. It is happening. So you may as well go with it. And when you have somebody who's written a book that has shared how she's got through it and some guides and tips for you to get through it as well, then you're not alone. You have somebody who's written, taken the time out to write something where she shows how I understand. This is how my path went. These are the things that I've done. These are the tips and tools I share. And that can be your companion on your journey of life. So therefore, you're not alone. So how do they get hold of both of your books? And also, how do they get hold of you? And what kind of programs are you offering women?
Mysterialwoman.com is my website. So
Can you spell that for
MYS.
people? Yeah, sorry, right,
Yeah,
great. You're ahead of me.
you're going to, because right, it's a word I invented, by the way,
Beautiful
because
word. It's a
we
beautiful
had
word.
no word to describe what we were seeing
Mm,
after 10 years of this research working with women. And it was a way of being that combined the mystery, this ability to be with the mystery, and the ability, the medial, what's called medial, which is a Jungian term for the ability to bridge between differences between the conscious and the unconscious. So one day this word just popped out of my mouth, mysterial. There it is.
there it is.
And then I decided, hey, why can't I invent a word? If this is an evolutionary move forward, we've never
Exactly.
seen this being in women before, and men actually.
Yeah.
A lot resonate with this as well. So Mysterial, Mysterial, woman.com. That's my website. You'll see everything about the work that we're up to. The murmuration, we call it our mysterial murmuration, when birds all flock together and move in that beautiful self-organizing pattern. Women waking up, growing up, showing up, as we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And my first book, The Way of the Mysterial Woman. Women are, and I think people in general, will want the first book once they read the new one coming out, because the new book, You Make Your Path by Walking, that just is on its way out in the world right now, A Transformational Field Guide Through Trauma and Loss, is the setup really for why it matters right now
Yeah.
to really use this moment, the heat of this fire, as a
Mm-hmm.
mutative fire for yourself if
Yeah.
you're in the midst of a real shakeup, right? That there's a mutation, and genes change in a heat.
Yes.
That we know that so this is a mutative potential that you're in the midst of. And I think that's what the second book really can give you a sense of what might be trying to awaken and how to walk through these difficult times with yourself fully present. So unfold your path in a way that leads to more of your becoming. And so get on my mailing list. You can join my mailing list, and then I'll let you know what I'm up to. Then we're doing a program based on this new book in the fall. And then my deeper program, and that's a 15-month program we call Mysterial Leadership Emergence. The next program doesn't launch until 2024. And that's for a small group of women. We have a global cohort right now with women every year from Asia, Europe, Africa, North America. So it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. So there are lots of ways women can, in particular, the second book is written for men and women, but the first book is more directed to women.
And the women in men, because we're waking up the feminine in the men, which is beautiful. They're becoming to identify more with that, which is, that lovely awakening, which is wonderful. And of course, you're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all as the Mysterial Woman. So they can all find you there as well. And, we are, whether we like it or not, we're in that shake-up. We are waking up. We are meant to move forward. There is a purpose for the human race. We've kind of been that experiment. I think it's the soul's journey to understand how to touch, taste, feel, be not just an essence, but in body. So when you look at it as that beautiful spiritual being having that human experience, and you put the two together and you really truly experience it, both from body, mind, heart, spirit, and soul, you understand. But there's a reason why we're all meant to go up to a higher elevation. And that higher elevation will then reveal the next journey of the human race. But we have to get there, and we have to get there collectively. And so it is really important, not just to yourselves, but to the collective, to the survival of the planet, that we all actually do ascend to this higher vibration, because that's where we're meant to be. We're a little bit behind time, actually, on our evolution. And this is why I've been saying for quite some time, they've been turning up that frequency more and more and more. It's shifting us. And this is why sometimes it can kind of feel like a rude awakening. But it's like we tried to do it softly. We've had to turn it up higher now to wake you up faster, because there's a need. there's a need for us to do so. But when you do step into it, and you do step into your higher consciousness, the real meaning of life is no longer a question. You know, it just is. You know what your part is in it. And it really is a beautiful place to be. So I hope all of you are willing to take the journey. Suzanne's here to help you, whether you read her books, whether you take her program. Listen to these podcasts over and over again, share it with friends and have a conversation. Remember Podcast Party, great way for everyone to listen to one podcast and then everybody share their own perspective of what they got from it. It broadens the mind even more. But please be a participant in your own journey. Don't sit back and let somebody else live it for you. This is your life and you're meant to be engaged in it. So get engaged. Thanks, Susan, for being with us today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration, it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.